Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Prime Use series of interviews with top business and technology experts. In this interview episode, I got a pleasure to sit and talk with Markus, who is Dutch, and it's important. And he is a lead data scientist at Capgemini. And also, Marijn is a passionate fighter for truth in Ukrainian-Russian war. In this interview episode, we talked about how to break the vicious cycle of fake news, misinformation, and propaganda by taking nuanced and evidence-based approach to understanding the factors that help promote false narratives. It's a great interview that offers effective strategies of breaking this vicious cycle of misinformation. And I hope you really enjoy it. If you do, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the Prime U YouTube channel. Stay tuned. Thank you so much for making the time to join us today. It's a great pleasure to welcome you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so Markus, for those who don't know you, maybe you could give just a brief overview, right, of your current position at Capgemini, and in general, where is your interest in artificial intelligence is coming from? What actually inspired you to pursue career in the industry?
Oh, hi everyone. My name is Markus in the Netherlands, Rotterdam. You know, I'm Dutch. Many years ago, I started out as a social scientist. I was young, I was stupid, I didn't know what to do. And my dad was mainly asking, Marijn, what the heck are you going to do for a living? You know, are you going to talk about people's feelings? Oh, well, yes, Dad, I was. Because I pursued a very quantitative, statistical, data-driven branch of social science / criminology, sociology. So I was building electoral outcome models, modeling pandemics like Ebola back in the day, the influence of playing video games on school performances. And I actually graduated on analyzing crime in Rotterdam, my hometown over here, which was the point where I had an intake at Capgemini, a large consultancy firm where I work to this day. And my then future boss told me, wow, Marijn, that's cool, that's data science. And I said, yes. And this is how I became a data scientist. And now I work with algorithms and AI. And back in the day, it just used to be statistics. It was not sexy at all. But now apparently I'm sexy.
Fantastic. Thank you for this very lighthearted and humorous introduction. Absolutely. So back in the day, you have used algorithms, maybe it was not called data science or artificial intelligence, but to be able to predict some of the, cataclysms or crises worldwide, right? And Ebola pandemic is one of them. So tell me, and I know that you're currently working helping governments across the globe, right, to predict the crisis and hunger or maybe war. Okay, we have a great co-guest.
Don't mind her. She won't mind us. This is Clary. Yeah. Clary, say hi.
Yeah, that's a sweet pat. So, Markus, going back to predicting, right? Using technology and predicting global crisis.
I think predicting is the wrong word here. And this takes me back to another origin story of mine, which is WikiLeaks 2007-8, when, back when Chelsea Manning and Julian Assange started doing the truth bombs on journalism back then, publishing all kinds of material that was actually from the American government to prove human rights were being violated and war crimes were happening back then in Afghanistan and in Iraq, which we already heard a lot about because there were many people claiming it, but we had something suddenly that a lot of people didn't, which is data. Data to use quantitative rather than qualitative methods to prove what was happening and to speak truth to power, to large governments in ways that beforehand just just weren't possible. Think of the Panama Papers, the fall of Nixon. Throughout in the last 100 years, we've often had investigative journalism, finding and gathering data, information, publishing it to show what is actually happening on the ground. And to me, WikiLeaks back then was an important part of what I do today, because that was the first time I had this eye-opener of, hey, people are saying one thing, which is there's fighting in these areas of Afghanistan. We have data to prove through math and statistics that another thing is happening, meaning they're also fighting in that and that area of Afghanistan. And that was being published, and that was a wild ride. And that is actually a major inspiration of the stuff I do to this day. So as a data scientist nowadays, I'm not just predicting. That's like the holy grail of, oh, I want an AI that will tell me exactly how much beer I'm gonna sell tomorrow. That's what business wants. But I tell you, they do not want that. Because what if I gave you the perfect AI that could forecast all your beer sales for the next year or so? But when you ask why, I just say, yeah, I don't know. It's a black box deep learning algorithm. It just says so. Because then you wouldn't trust it, nor would you believe it. And this is where the spectrum enters the field, from very simple data-based, Excel-based methods to highly advanced computation methods and everything in between, which you usually call machine learning and statistics, to explain what is happening, what are the causal mechanisms. And that is actually my job. So I'm not going to tell you this is how much beer you're going to sell, because you don't need that. You just think you need that. What you actually want me to do is run a model based on data from the last 3 to 5 years to show, okay, so when the weather is sunny, you sell extra beer. When you have a marketing bonus action, you sell this much extra beer, even though marketing claims all the extra beer sales are according to them, so they hate me. Holidays and weekends and school trips and Christmas all affect your beer sales to this much. So I actually researched the causal mechanisms. That's again the whole statistical part, which is not as sexy, to explain why you sold much or little beer in the past. And only once I've explained that can I start forecasting, well, the weather is gonna be pretty and Feyenoord is playing, so you'll probably sell more beer then and then, because then I can explain why I expect it to happen, and only then will people believe me. And only once you can do the predictive part by explaining the why, can you do the prescriptive part, which is to say, this is what you should do to maximize your beer sales, which is put it on sale when Feyenoord is playing and the sun is out. Let's go. And suddenly it's not cool anymore because I'm explaining it. And it's not AI anymore because I'm explaining it. Now it's just data and math and statistics, and it's not sexy anymore. So there's this constant battle between appearing cool and all-knowing and magical, which is also scary to legislators, privacy activists, a lot of people worldwide, and actually explaining what you're doing. Then it's not scary, but also not sexy. Because according to Freud and the human mind, those two are very much related.
Oh, wow. Okay, interesting. Okay, so you have explained some great causes, right? And I wanted to go back, to the Afghanistan war, right? Where you would be able to get the data, right? That would prove the alternative opinion or the statement. But what I was specifically interested in, you said that you had rather than quantity, so you opposed quantity of data to the quality of data. And I believe that many would find this, a bit challenging, right? So the quality of data can be, like there might not be the issue with that, but the quality can still be a critical question. So if you could elaborate on that a little bit more and how important are both, or...
I have to mention, first of all, that our methods back in 2007 were completely different from 2017 and different from now. Back then, it was all backdoor server entrance, C++ stuff, whereas 10 years later, when I was modeling Ebola, everything was R, and nowadays everything is Python. So coding languages and our tools that we have available change. Just like leaks in the 70s and 80s were all based on typewriters, because that's all we had. And then the graphical calculator came up, and teachers were protesting against calculators. Do you remember that?
No, I don't.
Teachers were protesting that calculators were arriving and it would be terrible and we should ban them because kids in school would no longer learn to calculate math in their head. In the same way, in the 90s, early 2000s, they lobbied to ban autocorrect in Word and Office and such, because then kids wouldn't learn to spell anymore. And you know what? Those teachers were right. I am terrible at spelling and I am terrible at doing math in my head. But I am still using all that technology to enhance and speed up the rest of my work. Because God help me, if I had to manually type out and do calculations all day, I would be so much slower. And I'm specifically mentioning this because today we are very worried about new technology like Midjourney and ChatGPT, generative AI applications, where we once again have teachers protesting we should ban this stuff. Hell, Italy already banned it like a week ago. They just gave Microsoft 20 days to reply. But this is the perspective that we need when we look at new and older methods, because any new method will become normal in about a decade and then old in a decade more. Just imagine doing your daily work without Microsoft Office.
Yeah, that would be hectic.
Why am I saying this? Because back then, quantitative evidence also meant something different. Back then, we had like very tiny, low resolution black-white footage of Reuters journalists. That you can Google it. That's an infamous case in Afghanistan, I remember. Reuters journalists being shot by operatives of the US Army, which was highly controversial at the time. And of course, immediately claimed this is fake, but this was way before deep fakes were a thing, way before we even called stuff fake news. Back then, we just called it propaganda, because fake news is nothing new. It's all 70s, 80s, Soviet, World War II even stuff. But back then, video evidence was very hard to fake. And if you have like 3 minutes of footage, that serves as very good evidence back then. Nowadays, not so much. Back then, just having mentions of specific places in leaked documents, which were not even open data. This was data leaked by Chelsea Manning, carried out on Lady Gaga CDs, because nobody checks Lady Gaga CDs. So it was burned on Lady Gaga CDs, stuffed into a pocket, and secretly smuggled out of an American military base, which is completely different from the leaks that we see today with like the 20-year-old kid who leaked data a few weeks ago on the current Ukraine war, because that kid was doing it for, how to say this, shits and giggles. He was leaking that just to impress his friends, whereas Chelsea Manning and their friends leaked this because they said the world must know and this is important. So the two shouldn't be equated whatsoever regarding the current discourse. Why am I saying all of this? Because back then, just having a movie of something was irrefutable evidence, basically. Nowadays, it is not. Nowadays, you need so much more. Back then, we had some documents mentioning fire going on over here and here and here. That was enough quantitative evidence for us to say, so there is fighting in these areas. Nowadays, we would need a whole lot more. Luckily, or unfortunately, there is so much more data and evidence these days, which brings me to the conclusion that nothing really changed except the war crimes are now in HD.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So, but at the same time, what I can get from this, that the approach to data and data analysis has tremendously changed from, let's say, 5 to 10 years, right? So when you said that if you had the video footage and that would be enough as an evidence of war crime, right now you would need a lot more
and
data,
that's a good thing, because
data.
both sides, or I should say, certain sides have become very good at faking video evidence or pretending that is fake, and we as humans are still very gullible and easy to convince. Well, if I already think this, then any evidence, no matter how bad it is, will probably reinforce the beliefs I already have, which brings us again back to Freud, who concluded, yeah, well, people already have their convictions and opinions, and they'll only believe evidence that supports it.
What can be done, right? So we are basically living in the world where we are being like, many parties are trying to manipulate us, right? It comes from political parties, right, trying to win elections, or from the global events like war or famine, or so what can we do how can we leverage technology to help counter this fake news and propaganda from your perspective?
The first mistake that we as humans tend to make is that there is not one person, one entity, or one party that has the truth, except my cat, probably. She's always right, aren't you, Clary?
Yes.
Yeah, but aside from my cat, we often want to believe in brave leaders, whether they have I don't know, a mustache or blonde hair or whatever, who know what's right, or a social media source that is always right. For me, the most important thing to counter misinformation, which is a common tactic dating back to World War II, World War One, but really solidified after World War II by the Frankfurt Schule, who wrote extensively about how misinformation tactics from Nazi Germany, from the Soviets, how they worked, which I studied.
Okay.
And yeah, it's like studying
I know
dinosaurs.
only from World War II the famous Goebbels, right? That he was.
Yeah, I'm gonna get to Goebbels in a bit.
Okay.
But the thing here is that they wrote about how to influence the masses, and I studied that thinking it was dinosaur stuff. And then I look outside and I see it happening today. Imagine studying dinosaurs and you look outside and you see a dinosaur walking. That
can be
that feeling.
life-changing.
But their main work also still applies, which is to never trust a single source, except my cat.
We will make her as a double feature. So we will put her on the cover of the interview.
You'll have to. She looks way better than me.
Okay.
So in the there are multiple factors here at play. In the West, we once again have the revival of strongman leadership. The strongman, I want to believe this guy who has all the answers, and the magical thinking derived from it. Google magical thinking. This is a psychology word. The magical thinking that if we just let him or her become president or whatever, it'll solve all our problems. Just with the meme with we do X ? Profit. That question mark, that is the magical thinking thing that we do when we put our trust not only in that previous American president, but it's happening all over Europe as well. And we just look further to the east. We have a strong man somewhere in a bunker. We have a strong man even further east, slightly south, who just became emperor for life. And many know not to just trust what they say. But the solution, because the solution to that first issue is to always consume multiple sources of information. I read multiple online sources, multiple newspapers, which often conflict one another. And this is why a free press and democracy are so crucial to the continued existence of our society. We have to be allowed to disagree. So we have to be able to publish content that we disagree with, which is why the current censorship on history and everything is so scary to me, because that is very direct censorship, and I have very strong views on how bad censorship is, because it automatically empowers the strongmen who want to censor dissent. But as a response to these World War II era tactics, we saw the Soviet fire hose of falsehood tactic arise, which is, okay, if people know better than to just listen to me, because they'll listen to other people and found out I'm speaking bullshit, we should produce so many falsehoods that none shall believe the truth, because they assume everything is false. And this is where the infamous, I know they're lying, they know they know, we know they're lying, we know they know we know they're lying, and still they are lying quote from about Soviet Russia, because Russian Soviet propaganda just knew people wouldn't believe them. But if they just produce so many falsehoods which counteract it, don't even match with each other, they directly conflict with each other, and this is the whole strategy. People will not believe any one of those falsehoods, but they'll stop believing the truth. And this is the most dangerous part. And this is the core of the whole tactic, not to make people believe a lie, but to make them stop believing in a truth. And this is the response to Goebbels' quote, I think, that you just mentioned, where he said, if you repeat misinformation often enough, if you want to lie, you make it a big lie, so big they can't avoid it, so it will become truth. But in the post-big lie era, which we are now slowly returning to with electoral fraud, there was the fire hose of misinformation era, which we nowadays call fake news on social media, but it was actually way older than that, where you just produce so many falsehoods like, we're invading Ukraine, but it's not an invasion, but it's not a war, but actually it is a war, and actually they started it, but it's also not a war. And
Ukraine is not a state. Ukraine has never existed. So it's another nation.
The stories don't even match with each other. So it's not a state. It doesn't exist, but we're also invading it to save our people, but also those don't exist. But just to ensure that somewhere the truth is lost. And current bot networks, misinformation being spammed on Twitter, on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, that influence our elections, that help certain presidents rise to power, that's all related to this. And this is why I'm so obsessed with all of it, because this is where my entire field comes together, basically.
So Markus, you have mentioned that you studied propaganda. Is this spreading information and your passion about the truth and fighting regimes across the world actually inspired by your knowledge and the past studies of the past propaganda?
Yes and no. I did a minor in social media and communication at the Utrecht Data School, part of Utrecht University. And what we call social media and communication nowadays used to be called propaganda, though many now call it marketing instead. But it's just one of many fields that interest me. But because it also heavily overlaps with the data field and the ethics field and the human behavior field, that's why it's so much at the forefront of things that interest me today, because it brings so many topics together. And as a student and as a professional, I learned it's not about it. It's no longer about knowing one thing. You used to get a degree in one thing, you become very good at one thing, you get a job in one thing. But nowadays it's about being able to combine the few things you know with the many more things other people know. It's not about being the one expert in the room. It is now about being multi-skilled enough to work with a large or a small team. So I am good, not just because I know data, but also because I know ethics, also because I have a social science background, also because I know my statistics, and also because I did opera when I was 18, so I know how to speak to a crowd.
Fantastic. All the great skills. And you know opera. So you can
maybe I can tell you, if you sing in Italian for a crowd of like 100, 200 people, and you have no clue what you're saying because it's in Italian, it's Don Giovanni, and your pants are like way too tight, but they love it anyway, then you can say anything in front of the crowd. And that's how I became a consultant.
So can you, well, that is fascinating, right? And I did not realize that, propaganda and anti-propaganda, right, was your actually core field, which actually now makes it clear for me why you are so passionate about advocating Ukraine or social media like LinkedIn. And I can see your posts where you try to bring the truth, right, to the masses. At the same time, the last remark that you have made, Markus, about this, that all of this propaganda, it actually has more global impact than two countries entering the war and one wants to conquer another one. So can you explain how all of these things are related, and what is it that maybe most of the people are missing? They would feel this is unfair and just war, people are suffering, it's a genocide, but they might not see the direct implication into their lives or their political situation.
Let me look at the micro level for a second and then scope out. Because at the micro level, when Afghanistan was happening, for example, I didn't know anyone from Afghanistan. Nowadays I do, but just for perspective. So as an individual, and this is not a justification, it's just psychology. As an individual, I cared less because I knew less people there. Last year, February, was a very different case because I knew two guys from Ukraine. One from online, never even been there. Didn't even know one of them is from Ukraine until he said, "Yeah, I'm gonna be offline for a bit. I'm joining the army." And I'm like, "Oh shit, you're in Ukraine." I just called him Eastern Ukraine. I just called him Eastern European bastard, and he called me Western European bastard. This is how you become friends. This is like, you call each other pimp and stuff. It's fun. It's fun.
Yeah.
And I haven't heard from him in like 4 or 5 months. This is why I, as an individual, suddenly cared, because I knew somebody who was going through it. Now, in the last years, I've worked a lot on refugee stuff. So I also know quite a few people from Syria. I know people from Iran. I work with people from Iran. Beautiful people. It's just the regime, not so much. And this brings together a whole lot of different things for me. The current war for Ukraine, not war in Ukraine, it's war for Ukraine, fought by Ukraine and Russia and accomplices. Because the world doesn't face an axis of evil today, like we did in World War II. Mm-hmm. But we do face an axis of opportunity, which is Putin and his allies. And you only need to Google to figure out which countries outside of Europe and 1 or 2 within Europe are actually his allies. They are allies of opportunity because they benefit from it politically and economically. They are not aligned in any sort of ideological way like they used to. You have to, like, the Cold War commie bloc and the liberal bloc, if only things were that simple as in those good old James Bond movies. But the thing is, Syria is messed up due to Assad, who got weapons from Putin. Iran is messed up due to the Ayatollah regime, who get weapons and money from Putin. Crimea got messed up because of Putin and Wagner. And MH17, which cost the lives of almost 200 of my countrymen, got messed up by a buck missile from Putin. So a lot of different things worldwide, and now I'm just focusing on the Eurasia side, because many parts of Africa, like Sudan, are messed up by Wagner PMC, which is owned by Russia as well. There's war crimes happening left and right. All of this is enabled by one of these core elements of the axis of opportunity. And this is why the war in Ukraine is not just, the war for Ukraine is not just about Ukraine. Because if Russia loses, when Russia loses and is pushed back, Moscow will probably bullshit about, yeah, the war's not going so well for us. But when Crimea falls and Putin has to bullshit about, oh, actually land I stole 9 years ago, that will be a political blow that he probably can't handle. But if Putin falls, his support for Assad falls. My friends from and in Syria have a chance at a better future. If the Iran regime falls, the people of Iran have a hope for a better future. All the people I work with in various parts of Africa will no longer be terrorized by Wagner. And a certain Winnie the Pooh will lose a very big ally in his own fight to take Taiwan. It is not just about Ukraine. So many people and so many crises in the world are affected and could be solved by the outcome of this war. And that is why it is not just important to me personally, as it is so important to many people from Ukraine or people who know people in Ukraine. One of my friends married a Ukraine lady. They're a great couple. I know a couple. She's Ukrainian. He's Russian. They raise funds together. It's like never in my life have I seen a power couple like that. And to me, that is also the beautiful part of this movement, that I'm talking to and working with so many people worldwide to raise awareness, to raise funds, to send like the East German guy that I know who grew up under the Soviet occupation regime, who is now just driving ambulances back and forth filled with children's feed, kids' feed, because Kyiv is short on kids' feed. And he's like, I know what kids have to go through when they're stuck under a regime like that. And
you can
there's so many beautiful people helping out, and that makes me emotional. And I just want to be a part of that in a way, in the same way that as a kid, I was part of the whole WikiLeaks Anonymous thing for the lols. And in the same way nowadays, we have the fellas, for example, and Sign My Rocket, United 24, all kinds of movements to help out in Ukraine, knowing that the results will affect so much more than just the people of Ukraine, but also the people of Syria and the people of Iran, many parts of Africa, South America. And I often have Westerners over here, and then I'm going to shut up. Westerners over here, so Dutch friends asking, Marijn, how can you just talk about terrible stuff like that? How can you joke about stuff like that? Because to the average Western white person, war and violence is such a faraway thing that we can't even process, which is also why we usually just say, yeah, you should make peace, because that's the only thing we ever learned. We think, yeah, you have to negotiate. And if you use violence, then you're both in the wrong. Well, tell that to any victim of violence or war crimes or colonization, because this is a modern colonizer's war. This is imperialism. And I thought we as Europe moved beyond colonization anyway. But it's because it's so far away from us that we, or many of us, cannot understand why you can talk about this so freely. Because I often make jokes about the conflict, like how high can this Russian tank fly, you know, or what bullshit does the Moscow regime come up with today to excuse their military failings, and I make fun of that. But many forget that humor is a coping mechanism. Humor is a very mighty coping mechanism, and the joke is here that the Westerners who have no personal stake in it, even though it, you know, the future of their freedom and their world very much also depends on it, they ask, why do you do this? Should you do this? Whereas my Syrian friends, my Iranian friends, my Turkish friends, my Kenyan friends, they all go, yeah, Marijn, keep doing this. Keep talking. The world needs to hear, because they can all relate to something terrible, something violent happening to their community, their country. And the world is just silent about it and ignores it and says, yeah, can't you just go and suffer in silence? Because that is what the West is basically telling everyone when they say, we don't want to associate with this. We don't want this in our lives.
Can we say
Because
that at the same time?
silence facilitates violence.
Can we say that at the same time? Yeah, Markus, when we see that Western world prefers to stay in silence, can we say that in some way they become the axis of opportunities? So there are lots of businesses with Russia, and in this way you actually participate in this, massacre, right?
There are so many in my country even. People say, yeah, it's not professional, not business-like, but hey, I've been stuck in ethical debate about business for as long as I have been working, which is over 6.5 years now. And first we had the gender equality revolution and diversity revolutions and the sustainability revolutions. And each and every time I was way ahead of the curve working on that stuff 1 or 2 years before it actually became popular. And now we're stuck with do we do business with Moscow and pay taxes with Moscow and thereby fund war crimes and genocide? And I'm really waiting for that topic to catch on in business. I'm really hoping, but I think it will take a few more years. But if we just get very loud about it, then maybe we can accelerate it a little bit, because there's too many businesses, even in my own country, Kuf Heineken, who still do business with Russia, in Russia, pay taxes in Russia, and thereby fund the missiles Russia sends flying at Ukraine.
What do you think? So, except of spreading, right, the truth, being the passionate about the truth, what can we as professionals in different fields do to help stop it? Like what kind of action item would you take it out of
I'm
this?
very glad you asked, because this is why I've been drinking coffee from this mug for a very long time, because I can't give you a full answer here. But the first era of misinformation, it wasn't the first, but I'm just playing it, was fighting one big lie. Then we entered the era of misinformation, where there's too many lies that you have to fight. And right now we are actually witnessing history in a way, because traditionally misinformation was fought top down from one government institution versus another. But now these government institutions also have financial interests, so they're on the low. We're witnessing right now on, for example, Twitter, one of the first bottom-up initiatives to fight misinformation, which is NAFO and the fellas who are just spamming Russian misinformation and bots, because there's 5 to 10% of Twitter is bots, who are yelling all these fake war crime things. Ukraine is not a country. They're actually brotherly nations. Brotherly nations don't shoot at each other, for fuck's sake. Poland and Ukraine nowadays are brotherly nations. They're helping each other out. That's like God intended. That's how you do it. But they don't engage in serious debate. This is the crucial part. If we see misinformation, we usually engage in debate. But this is the whole tactic since Soviet times, to just speak your lies as loudly as possible so somebody will debate them and thereby repeat them and thereby publish them. Simply by sheer force of repeating that all those different lies over and over, the West, even on the Dutch news over here, we've knowingly or unknowingly repeated Moscow lies about, 30% of the country speaks Russian, which does not at all mean that you identify as Russian, because you learned that stuff at gunpoint And I thought we were beyond
That's
the
part
whole
of colonization, right?
That is colonization. And I thought we were beyond the part of judging what people are like over here based on what they have, I don't know, in the rest of them and such. So it's terrible in all possible things. But by debating it seriously, engaging in debate, we lend it credibility. NAFO instead makes fun of it. And that is what you should do at this point. We don't don't engage in saying this is where you're factually wrong, because this is the fifth time you're making fake war crime claims. We just start spamming Shiba Inu dogs onto your head and photoshopping your face onto a dinosaur and such. And by sheer force of hundreds of thousands of brain damaged dogs, as we call them, we mess up the debate. And this is actually how modern Russian state-affiliated media is being taken down left and right, which makes NAFO a surprisingly effective new bottom-up anti-misinformation operation, which we have never before seen in history. This is why I'm very engaged with it, because holy shit, I wish I was a student nowadays. You know, there's so much stuff happening. I'm just using this as a small example because I like to talk about memes, but more importantly, on a larger scale, you deconstruct the lies and you make fun of them, because there is nothing that a dictator fears more than being made fun of. In Belarus, it is by law forbidden to photograph the back of the head of Lukashenko, because you'll see he's balding. And I can sympathize with that, you know, but I don't think I would lock up journalists for photographing the back of my head. But over there they do, because Lukashenko doesn't want people to make fun of him. So that's exactly what you should do. Please world, continue to Photoshop Putin and Xi and Lukashenko and the Ayatollahs and Assad and everyone else onto the most crude paint, Photoshop, PowerPoint, I don't give a damn induced pictures you can find. I don't even care if the meme is lame, though I will judge you for it. Because the more we do this, the less status and power they can retain. In the same way that Saddam Hussein became a meme, Kim Jong-il became a meme, and that's actually what you need. And over here in the West, that's okay. I mean, the amount of Trump and Biden memes are off the charts, and that's okay, because this is a free nation. These are free nations, and I think what I'm trying to get at here is that dictators want to be feared, because that's the only way they maintain power. The only way to ensure they do not win, they do not retain that power, is by doing the opposite of fearing them, which is mocking them, making fun of them, deconstructing them. Or like one very brave Ukrainian soldier say Slava Ukraini in their face.
Yeah.
Before he was
shot.
With
his life, yes.
Which was a war crime. Again and again. We have more than a year of photographic evidence waiting in The Hague, just like 50 kilometers that away from here. And beers are on me by the time that happens. And I hope to see you all there.
Thank you for being passionate advocate, for working tirelessly, for spreading the truth. It's been a huge pleasure to have this conversation with you, Markus, and looking forward to following you and the discussion that you have across social media. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you for having me. Thank you for letting me narrate for like close to 40 minutes by now. I'm sorry for that. And please, audience, remember, what is new now will be old in like 1 or 2 decades from now. So don't over focus on the hype and what is new now, but focus on what is the same as last time, because we say, oh, ChatGPT is new nowadays. but I like to compare it to the calculator, to Office, to the arrival of the typewriter and the printing press, and the arrival of Google is the best comparison, because they all changed their lives. But it's not like all jobs got automated and all everything disappeared. No, they became different. And the goal of data analysis, be it for beer sales or for war crimes, is not to look at what is new and unique, but to look at what is consistent, what is the same over multiple iterations, because those you can analyze and those you can use to predict or guess, because in the end we're guessing, what is likely and what is unlikely to happen. And that is also why we must look at this conflict so very clearly, because it has great implications for what's going to happen to Taiwan, what could happen for the people of Syria, for the people of Iran, what will happen to most dictators sooner or later, and how kleptocratic terrorist regimes in the end all come crumbling down because their leader just doesn't have access to good quality information, because everyone just keeps lying to him to keep their lives together. And this is why we should value free society, free flow of information, democracy, and it allows us to post memes. So yeah, that's the best part.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great summary. And yeah, so thanks a lot. It's been a pleasure, Markus.
Thank you.